Alright, what is poppin', people? We're back. And I got a little bit of an interesting one. So, obviously, with Flygon leaving the tier, team building is much different. I went over that in the last video. I don't know, did I just unplug something here? Nope. Looks like we're all good. Hey. But I went over in the last video about a whole lot of Pokemon that would benefit from Flygon's departure. I might have also covered a couple, just briefly, that sort of miss Flygon being in the tier. But the important thing I want to focus on again is just what kind of Pokemon are happy that Flygon's no longer around. And I wanted to go over a team that I had actually built while Flygon was in the tier, but what I actually think is a lot better now that Flygon is gone. And you saw me briefly flash it on here, but it is the team titled Choice Band and Dirt Horse. And who's the Dirt Horse? It's my boy Mudsdale, rolling in the mud, getting down and dirty with him. The Choice Band of Mudsdale, as I mentioned in the last video, is a mon that really likes the fact that Flygon is no longer in the tier. Because one of the biggest issues for Mudsdale, offensive variants in particular, was that once defensive Flygon rose to prominence, you just kind of were dead weight in like most matches. Because, you know, Defog or whatever defensive Flygon you were running, that was such a common Pokemon. And if you're on Choice Band Mudsdale, you don't ever beat it. Against Scarf Flygon, even like Choice Banded Flygon, Choice Banded Close Combat from you would like eviscerate those sets. So you were fine. This was still a pretty good set back in the earlier meta, before Flygon really took over. But it fell off really heavily. With Flygon's departure though, I want to go over this team. So, let's look at the rest of the team as well, just so we got it here. Now, what I really like about Mudsdale is the coverage. Earthquake from it's obviously super strong. This mon's got base 125 attack, big number. And when you look at what actually resists ground in the tier, or even is immune to ground, Mudsdale's got pretty much the coverage for all of it. Rock Slide, you know, dealing with your flying types, hits the Zatus of the world, the Talonflames of the world even. Close Combat, I mean, look, it was obviously mostly for Flygon, but it's also just a really strong move. Hits Rotom Mo, I would say is probably the most relevant target. It's a decent mid-ground play against a Bronzong if you still don't know what ability it has. Obviously, Lash Out hits that for harder, but hey, don't worry about it. What else is Close Combat hit? I feel like I'm missing something. Let's see. What would I be missing that Close Combat hits? Guzzlord, that's the big one. Because, little known fact, defensive Guzzlord makes even Choice Banded Golurk look weak. I'm pretty sure you avoid a 2-hit KO from, like, Earthquake from it. So CC is really good coverage for that. And of course, Lash Out. Now, Lash Out's kind of a funny move. If I'm remembering right, back in, like, the... I want to say it was right when DLC 2 dropped. Oh no, around late 2020, though. There were people talking up Lash Out on Mudsdale just to hit, like, Zatu. You know, otherwise, you know, you had your Stealth Rocks bounce back. So we had people talking about Lash Out just as a little bit stronger of a move for Zatu. And I think it also compressed a few other targets. But I think it's actually pretty good on Choice Banded Mudsdale, because it, you know, what are some other mods that resist Earthquake? Well, a lot of the grass types in the tier actually have a secondary typing that makes them weak to Dark. Celebi, Decidueye, Delmise. All of these get just blasted by Lash Out. And of course, Levitate Bronzong, this is going to be your best move for that. You still hit Zatu, and you can definitely run into some cores that feature Zatu plus another one of those Pokemon. So it removes the need to maybe even risk a miss with Rock Slide. In terms of other targets, I can't really think of any, because Lash Out, you know, gets neutral targets, or neutral Earthquake targets. Even if it's super effective, it's, you know, the same damage as Earthquake. And I'd probably click an Earthquake if I want to hit one of those. So, alright, how do we build out the rest of this team? Well, in terms of synergy with Mudsdale, I did not go for that immediately. I went for my Rocker, I went for Diancie. And with the CV spread, we are creeping Vaporeon, just so that's out there. But, so, my thing with building teams is a lot of time I do like to figure out my Stealth Rock setter early on. And it's not like that's a necessary thing when building, but I picked that habit up from Banks. Because she would, you know, mention how it's just nice to find that synergy early on. And I kind of agree. So, Diancie, because, well, one of the things was this. If I close combat a Talonflame, I want to be able to get rid of the burn. So we got a Zeal Bell Diancie for that. But, in general as well, I figure a lot of the things that Mudsdale would be tasked with checking, Diancie could sort of handle some of them. Mostly you'd be looking at maybe Salazzle from that regard. Fire types, Diancie still feasts versus as well, or other fire types I guess I should say. And so I kind of liked being able to immediately compensate for that. Now I do think you could probably build this team out with a Bronzong as well and then change Starmie to something else. But I really valued having Heal Bell here, getting that immediately figured onto the team. And Diancie does that really well. Diancie's also nice to pressure a few of things that Mudsdale maybe wanted out of the way. So you can talk about Xatu, Bronzong even. Diancie's able to make a decent amount of progress versus those, and that could open up Earthquake spam. Now, a lot of people like to hard their Bronzongs into Diancie, and if you get the Diamond Storm boost, you kind of beat Bronzong. Or at least you can. Depends on if they're like a Flash Cannon variant, or maybe even just an Iron Defense Bronzong of their own. But I like Diancie's overall synergy with Mudsdale still, despite the typing being a little bit unfortunate with how it overlaps and stacks some defensive weaknesses. Now next up, Mon that actually has the synergy. Swords Dance Drapion. Now, Drapion's another Pokemon that we covered in the last video that really benefits a whole lot from the leaving of Flygon. You know, Drapion already was pretty hard to manage defensively, and its checks really do end up a lot of the time feeling like it's only defensive ground types. So you lose the best one in the tier, well, Swords Dance Drapion gets a whole lot better. And Choice Band of Mudsdale, with how strong of a breaker it is, how it also applies pressure to, you know, opposing Mudsdale. And then, what else would I want to maybe say? Bulky water types. Yeah, because if you're running like a bulky Vaporeon maybe, that could be annoying. Blastoise if you run into one of those Rapid Spin block variants. Well, those are running physical bulk. It's got good synergy with that guy. And so, obviously, his core was definitely better, by the way, when Flygon was around. But I think the idea still stands as well. Or still stands to this day. Even Pokemon like Guzzlord, we you know, mentioned it earlier, that Mon can actually take hits unreasonably decently from Mudsdale, so it's nice to have that extra up there. And even if you want to talk about other Pokemon that that Mudsdale might try to force damage onto or just get rid of entirely. I mean, Talonflame, if they try to pivot in on your Earthquake or close combat. Vileplume, you do pressure that heavily, and Vileplume can definitely try to fish for a matchup win there with like Effect Spore, Strength Sap shenanigans. You might be able to cheese your way through that. And this is also just like an age-old way of having synergy on teams. Physical Wall Breaker plus physical Setup Sweeper. So, it's not like there's a whole lot special going on here. I also just really valued the fact that Drapion gave us that Grass Resist. As you can see right here, Decidueye and even Dhelmise, if you want to get real spicy, kind of feasting. Even Celebi, kind of feasting. So, Drapion giving us that nice check. Not a great Celebi answer, but good Decidueye answer. Still an okay Celebi answer. We're starting to patch up some defensive holes, and we're going to continue doing that by getting a nice ground immunity here in Talonflame. Now, I wanted some pivot support, obviously, for Mudsdale. It's a slow wall breaker, and while Mudsdale is good defensively, when you stop investing in its defenses, it becomes a lot less adept at switching directly into foes that it would otherwise normally be able to, you know, such as Salazzle, for instance. And while Talonflame's a fast pivot, it still can get Mudsdale in against some of the rock types of the tier, like Tyrantrum and Aerodactyl, for instance. Both of which you can handedly defeat. And Talonflame is also nice because it starts giving us a few of the other defensive things we noted, right? As I said, ground immunity. We already have 2 ground weaks, and then a Pokemon on our team that would maybe normally be tasked with taking ground type moves. Can't really do that with this set. You know, maybe you can still take like a Rogue Earthquake, right? If I have to panic, take an Earthquake, with my Mudsdale, yeah, I can. But it doesn't want to take those hits super consistently. And so just having a Pokemon that makes ground types think twice about going for Earthquake is really helpful. You know, Golurk is the mon that really comes to mention here, because if you're looking at these first three, Golurk can force some very unfun situations. And then Will-O-Wisp, Talonflame on this team is just really helpful. Crippling Bronzong is super good, of course, for getting Mudsdale in a better spot. The rock types as well. They can kind of go in. As we mentioned, Mudsdale, while it can switch into rock types, again, you don't really want to have to consistently switch into things with it. And having a Pokemon that can make that a little easier to do, potentially, is really helpful. And it's just nice to get some speed on this team. We're starting off with very slow Pokemon. Even with speed investment, I mean, this is where we're at. I'm even running a fast Diancie on this team. This is still where we're at. And a Drapion, not a slow mod per se, but not fast either. So, you're going to see it. We start trying to get a little bit more speed in these last few slots. So Talonflame is just good for that. And also, look, fighting resist, kind of needed one. Mudsdale can usually check Surfetched, assuming you avoid a crit. Not with Choice Band. No. I'm taking like 80 from CC, I'm sure. Speaking of fire resist though, here's a Starmie. Talk about pivots and how they synergize really well with slow breakers. I wanted a slow pivot as well. And I hadn't gotten around to messing with these utility Starmie sets all too much at the time of building the team. And so I was like, hey, I need a water resist on this team still. While Starmie's not a great one, it at least does resist water. Helps me with contending against Vaporeon, right? So with Starmie. And Natural Cure especially is cool for that Vaporeon matchup if they're, like, toxic. Because while I do think Heal Bell Vaporeon is the significantly better set this generation, if they are one of those toxic sets that looks to try to just 6-0 a team when it's the last mon alive, it's nice to have a guaranteed slow pivot with Natural Cure. Because that lets us get, you know, say Rotom in, maybe our Mudsdale in to just Earthquake Vaporeon down. You know, there's a nice couple things. Secondary fighting resist as well. Now, I don't want this mon taking close combats from things like Surfetched or Guts Machamp. Don't even really want it taking hits from Toxicroak because, well, I don't have a psychic move, guys. I mean, I do, but Teleport doesn't do damage, guys. So, it's still nice, though. If I need, like, something to take one of those hits in a pinch, Starmie can do that. And of course, Rapid Spin is really good at this point. Team had 3 grounded Pokemon. Spikes are really good right now. Need to make sure those don't stay up. And while I do lose to some of the spin blockers of the tier, like Delmise and Decidueye, I can still burn fish versus those. And as Decidueye's trend to be more physically oriented, I think it's really helpful to have at least something that can maybe look to punish those spin blocking attempts. And as we noted a little bit earlier, Teleport's just really good. Giving Mudsdale free entry is super crucial. Even giving, like, Drapion entry against some of those grass types, like Celebi, Decidueye, that's really good for it as well, so it can find chances to just start making that mid-game progress that it's so well known for. One of the big things about Drapion is just the fact that knockoff and poison jab poisons, those make that mod so much more annoying than it has any reason to be. So much more. So, gotta get it against mons that let it actually make that progress is super good. Now, last mon. Again, I don't like Starmie as a Soul Water resist at all, so we added another. This was originally a Choice Scarf Rotom Mo. But the more I thought about it, more I was like, my own Rotom Mo matchup is kind of dire if I don't have something that can a little bit more consistently take hits from it. And so I opted to change it to Nasty Plot plus Pain Split set. Not only does this still maintain having a whole bunch of pivot support, but this also gives me another potential late game Pokemon that can really help take advantage of Vaporeon as well. You know, I mentioned earlier how Starmie gives me at least that slow pivot out of Vaporeon, but I still don't really have any way of actually just beating Vaporeon outright. Drapion can make a whole lot of progress against it if it doesn't get burned. Mudsdale, if I get a safe switch in, Earthquake's gonna do a whole bunch too. But Plot Rotom Mo is just a really good way of overwhelming Vaporeon right on the spot. And a nice thing too is, again, look at the synergy that Rotom as a pivot has with my other guys. Being able to Volt Switch into, say, Drapion on a Grass type, or into Diancie on a Dragon type, or Mudsdale on a, I was gonna say on a Poison type, but it'd be literally like Vileplume and Dragalge. Hey, you beat Dragalge, so yeah, on some of the Poison types, is really good. And when you've got these teams that do stack a lot of pivots, you want to make sure that there's good synergy between the pivots and the Pokemon they'd be looking to pivot into. And so I think that's just, again, another little nice thing about this team. And in this Flygonless meta, we're already seeing a lot of talk about Rotom being potentially too overbearing. Now, some people have still pushed back against that idea. I've been like, it doesn't even get that much better. I don't agree with that take. I think it's really hard to stop Rotom from making consistent incremental progress in this tier. Because what am I really wanting to Volt Block with? You know? It's, again, some of the things we talked about. The sets that don't force you to lock into Choice Scarf are just so good. Even Choice Specs, though, I've seen some hype around that, and I do think it's a pretty good set. For those that want to try it out, Leaf Storm, Dark Pulse, Volt Switch, Trick. There you go. Dark Pulse you run just for coverage. Plus, it can actually make some decent progress against things like Vileplume if you've got Hazard support. And with how good Garbodor is right now, I think that it's not too hard to get that. But yeah, this is the team. I will put it down below in the description if you want to try it out. Again, I haven't tested this much at all lately, but look, I played it with Flygon. It was in the tier, and the team did well. Do you think this team's gonna get any worse than Flygon got? I do really enjoy this team, though. Choice Band and Mudsdale was one of my favorite sets to use back in the DLC 1 metagame. I think it was DLC 1 at least. Regardless, when we first got Mudsdale, it was just a really neat breaker because of the coverage. And, well, yeah, the power, too. I've said this multiple times before, but let's go back to when Mienshao was in the tier, right? One of the things that made me a little bit lower on Mienshao than some others was that I didn't like how frail it was as a breaker. It just always turned me away from trying to build with it because I felt it took a lot of extra support to cover up for the defensive holes that it would leave in a team. So I was always just like, wow, really wish I could put a Beware here instead. But Mudsdale sort of like those, you know, bulky wall breakers. I like to get a little bit of utility from my breaker, and Mudsdale can still provide that. It's not a great Volt Switch blocker, but it still does that. It's got enough natural bulk to take random rogue hits that are, you know, still quite strong. Again, like some CCs, some Earthquakes, you know. I can take them in a pinch. Yeah, that's the team, guys. I hope you enjoyed this little coverage of it. I've been walking around my room this entire time while talking about the team. But I wanted to get another video out. I was gonna try to do something with Cap. I like to make my own little personal viability rankings threads sometimes just to see how I'm feeling about tiers that I play, especially because literally any metagame I play I'm on the VR Council for. So it's always nice for me to prepare my next voting slate early. But then I realized, oh god, there's so much to talk about, and a lot of this is just OU stuff. So I think what I'll probably end up doing is, I do think doing Cap would be interesting, but I'll probably change how I do the video. Maybe just talk about like certain caps and why they're good, what they do, or why they're bad even in the case of some. And yeah, guys, that's it for me. I hope you guys enjoyed. I'll try to get... I want to do another live soon, because I do want to actually, you know, ladder more consistently. I just need to get into that mood, you know. Anyhow, guys, I'll catch y'all next time. Hope you're enjoying yourselves. Peace.